In the months after the war ended in 1945, a bank teller in London was counting the day's intake of currency, as he always did. He held a £5 note in his hand and examined it carefully. The paper felt right. The watermark was clear. The figure of Britannia was rendered with exquisite precision. He placed the note in the tray marked genuine. What he did not know was that this particular banknote had been pulled from the bottom of an Austrian alpine lake only hours earlier, and it had not been printed by the Bank of England. This note came from the largest counterfeiting operation in human history, a secret Germany scheme codenamed Operation Bernhard. Had it succeeded entirely, the British economy might have collapsed in the middle of the Second World War. Its story still serves as a warning to every nation. The value of money ultimately rests on trust. Welcome to Finance Traveler, where we explore the epic stories of money, power, and capital across time. Using counterfeit currency as a weapon of war was not a Germany invention. The history of forging enemy money goes back to ancient Greece. Frederick the Great of Prussia forged Polish currency during the 7 Years' War. Napoleon ordered the production of counterfeit Austrian and Russian notes. During the American Civil War, both the Union and the Confederacy printed fake versions of each other's paper money in attempts to destroy the other side's economic foundation. But Germany took the concept to its extreme. They were not content with forging a few notes here and there. They set out to systematically, industrially manufacture counterfeit currency and use it to bring down an entire nation's economy. The idea began almost by accident. In 1939, a German criminal police chief made a bold proposal. Why not produce massive quantities of counterfeit British pounds and flood the English market, triggering hyperinflation? When prices spiraled out of control, savings evaporated, and the public lost faith in the currency, Britain's capacity to wage war would collapse. A highly classified document recorded the plan's core philosophy. This was not to be forgery or counterfeiting in the ordinary sense, but the production of genuine facsimiles. The notes had to be such perfect copies of the originals that even the most experienced bank tellers could not tell the difference. Before the war, British banknotes were considered the most difficult currency in the world to counterfeit. They incorporated the most advanced anti-forgery technology of the time, each layer of defense carefully designed to stop would-be counterfeiters in their tracks. The paper itself was not ordinary. British banknotes were made from a special linen rag paper produced by a single mill under exclusive contract to the Bank of England. The exact composition of the raw materials was a closely guarded trade secret. Unlike ordinary paper, this linen rag paper had evenly distributed fibers, a dense texture, and a distinctive feel. When you rubbed it between your fingers, it produced a crisp sound that ordinary paper could not replicate. More critical was the watermark. The watermark on British banknotes was not a simple pattern, but a multi-layered, three-dimensional relief effect. It was created by controlling fiber thickness during the paper-making process. Thicker sections appeared darker, thinner sections lighter. To match the genuine notes perfectly, counterfeiters would have to replicate not just the pattern of the watermark, but the exact thickness variations at every point. The watermark process was the work of a master craftsman and widely considered impossible to copy. The obverse of the note featured the figure of Britannia, an intricate engraving designed by Daniel Maclise of the Royal Academy of Arts. This was not an ordinary illustration, but an intaglio engraving. The lines of the image were not printed on the surface of the paper, but pressed into it. When you touched the note, you could feel the raised lines. That was the hallmark of intaglio printing. Intaglio engraving was an extraordinarily difficult skill. The engraver had to carve the image into a steel plate, and every cut, every change in depth and angle affected the final printed result. The engraving on British banknotes achieved a resolution of hundreds of lines per inch, the gaps between lines no wider than a human hair. To replicate such an engraving, counterfeiters would need to find engravers of equivalent skill and then trace every line with a microscope. The figure of Britannia on British currency later became known among the counterfeiters as Bloody Britannia because it took them 7 months to finish copying it. Beyond the visible patterns, British banknotes contained hundreds of tiny security marks. These were intentional minor flaws deliberately introduced by the Bank of England as anti-counterfeiting devices. Each denomination had its own unique combination of marks, with positions and shapes carefully designed. Some marks could only be seen with a magnifying glass. Others were only visible under light at specific angles. The existence of these marks was a closely guarded secret, known in full only to a handful of senior Bank of England officials. The counterfeiters had to discover each of these hidden marks and replicate them precisely on new printing plates. Any omission or deviation would be caught in a professional bank examination. Every British banknote also bore a unique serial number, a combination of letters and digits. These numbers were not random. They followed a complex mathematical algorithm. The serial numbers were recorded in leather-bound ledgers at the Bank of England, so every note's issuance, circulation, and redemption could be traced. To counterfeit large quantities, the forgers had to generate serial numbers that appeared valid. If they invented numbers at random, they might duplicate numbers already withdrawn from circulation or violate the algorithm rules. The Germans brought in top mathematicians and banking experts to crack the numbering system. They spent months analyzing thousands of genuine serial numbers, searching for mathematical patterns. But the system was far more complex than they had anticipated. In the end, the forgers could not fully break the numbering algorithm. They settled for a compromise solution. They copied valid serial numbers from genuine notes and reused them. This flaw later became the key weakness that led to the discovery of the counterfeit money. Even with perfect paper, perfect engravings, and valid serial numbers, printing itself presented a challenge. British banknotes used specially formulated inks whose colors shifted subtly under different lighting conditions. Intaglio printing required enormous pressure to press the image into the paper, pressure that ordinary printing presses could not achieve. The forgery team established a complete production line with specialized intaglio presses and ink mixing equipment. They tested ink formulas repeatedly and adjusted printing pressures until the notes they produced matched the genuine articles in both color and texture. The final step was aging. Newly printed counterfeit notes looked too new. They did not look like currency that had been in circulation. A dedicated team was responsible for making the notes appear used. They rubbed them repeatedly with dirty hands. They folded them. They created the natural wear patterns that come with handling. Where the paper was folded, it softened and the color faded, just like a genuine note that had been in someone's wallet for months. By the second half of 1943, this counterfeit production line was at its peak. The printing presses could turn out about 1 million notes per month. By the time the operation ended in 1945, nearly 9 million notes had been produced, with a total face value of £134,610,310. That amount exceeded 1/3 of all British currency in circulation at the time. The initial plan was to drop bundles of counterfeit notes over Britain from bombers. In wartime Britain, with its shortages and rationing, the thinking was that if money fell from the sky, most people would not turn it over to the police, but would spend it. With millions of fake notes flooding the market, prices would soar, savings would vanish, and inflation would destroy the British economy. But as the war progressed, the German Air Force lost control of the skies. By 1943, when the forgery operation could produce counterfeit notes on a massive scale, the Germans no longer had enough bombers to carry out the airdrop mission, nor aircraft capable of penetrating British air defenses. So the purpose of the counterfeits was changed. The head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, took over the operation and redirected it from destroying the British economy to funding German intelligence operations and purchasing strategic supplies. From late 1943 onward, crates of counterfeit notes were transported to a former hotel near Merano in the South Tyrol region of northern Italy. There, a complex money laundering network was established, run by a career criminal who had been dealing in illegal currency and smuggling since the 1930s. He reported directly to Himmler. The counterfeit currency entered circulation through multiple channels. Some of it was used directly to pay spies. Germany intelligence networks across Europe used the fake notes to pay informants and agents. The most famous case was the Turkish agent codenamed Cicero, who stole British secrets from the ambassador in Ankara and was paid for his work with counterfeit notes from Operation Bernhard. Some notes were sent to German diplomatic missions in neutral countries, exchanged for local currency. Black market transactions were another major channel. Fake notes bought gold, diamonds, weapons, real estate, and art across Europe. These goods were resold for real money. Germany traded worthless paper for wartime resources. Legend says Mussolini's 1943 rescue was funded by Operation Bernhard, costing roughly £100,000. By war's end, 15% of counterfeit notes circulated. With a total face value of 134 million, about 20 million fake currency was in the economy. The Bank of England learned of fakes in 1943. A Tangiers bank reported suspicious currency. Experts in London were stunned. The notes were too good. This was deemed the most dangerous discovery. The flaw, serial numbers. Counterfeiters couldn't crack numbering rules, reusing numbers from genuine notes. Bank ledgers showed a deposited note's serial number already paid off. An alert clerk caught it, revealing the counterfeiting operation's scale. Counterfeit notes appeared across Europe, Africa, the Middle East, US, and Asia. By 1944, the problem forced the British government to consider options. The British economy faced severe impact. About 20 million fake notes circulated. In a wartime economy, extra money chasing fewer goods drove prices up. Then, public confidence was shattered. People suspected any note might be fake, cracking the foundation of economic activity. Transactions froze. The counterfeit crisis fell unevenly. The wealthy had bank accounts, paying with checks, rarely handling cash. For them, it was a news story. For workers, soldiers, shopkeepers, housewives, cash was everything. A fake note meant days of lost wages or months of savings, with no safety net. The British government faced an impossible dilemma. Acknowledging the seriousness could collapse confidence. Denying it meant more victims. The government chose denial. The Chancellor suppressed news, ordered media silence, and refused to discuss the threat, assuring the public it was exaggerated. Behind the scenes, new banknotes were prepared. In February 1945, the Chancellor made an unprecedented decision: withdraw all £10 notes. Opposition came from all sides. Banks couldn't handle the workload. Officials worried about public perception, shaking national confidence during wartime. The order was never carried out. From the German perspective, Operation Bernhard didn't destroy the British economy, but supported the war machine. Through laundering, Germany acquired foreign currency and strategic materials. On black markets, Bernhard notes bought gold, diamonds, weapons, and art, and these goods were resold for genuine money, funding German intelligence and military actions. Yet Joseph Goebbels was skeptical, calling it a grotesque scheme. His reasoning: if Germany attacked Britain with fake money, Britain could retaliate. The German mark was far more fragile than the British pound. The economics minister worried destabilizing the pound would cause severe fluctuations in international markets, negatively impacting the mark. There was another unintended consequence. Operation Bernhard's success weakened Germany's own currency security to some extent. When the Bank of England introduced new banknotes with metal security threads, German forgery technology couldn't keep up. In the war's final stages, as Germany's economy collapsed, leaders found their weapon, counterfeit currency, useless for saving their own economy. After the war, Operation Bernhard notes didn't disappear. In Britain, they circulated for years, so convincing merchants and banks couldn't tell. This forced the Bank of England to withdraw all notes over £5. A new £5 note was issued in 1957 with a blue design and metal thread. 10, 20 and £50 notes were reintroduced in 1964, 1970 and 1981. Even in the 60s and 70s, counterfeit notes still appeared. Oddly, many users were former German agents, paid with notes they didn't know were fake. After hiding for decades, they spent the money. That was their mistake. The counterfeit notes became a death warrant, helping investigators track down former Germans who had evaded capture. In 1967, repair workers in Murano, Italy, found a stash of Bernhard notes hidden inside organ pipes worth £5 million. In 1959 and 2000, divers brought up crates of notes from Lake Toplitz in the Austrian Alps. They lay in cold water for over half a century. When recovered, the printing was crisp, paper intact. In 2009, during a financial crisis, the Bank of England invited 91-year-old Adolf Berger. Berger, a prisoner forced to participate, held a £5 note to a lamp, pronouncing it fake. He pointed to a small pinhole he deliberately placed there. In 1945, it was estimated that as much as 1/3 of all British pounds in circulation were counterfeit. The number may have been exaggerated, but no one knows for certain. The Bank of England has never released complete records. Operation Bernhard did not destroy the British economy. Not because the notes weren't good enough. They were so good, even Bank of England experts couldn't distinguish them from genuine currency. The operation failed because when time came to drop notes over Britain, the German Air Force no longer controlled the skies. A vast economic warfare plan was stopped by a factor unrelated to its technology. The counterfeit notes that sank to Lake Toplitz still lie there. They are the most authentic remnants of economic warfare, sheets of worthless paper that came close to destroying an empire's economic lifeblood. The value of money has never been in the paper itself. It lies in the trust that every person who accepts a banknote has that the next person will accept it too. When that trust is broken, currency becomes nothing more than finely printed paper. And the deepest lesson of Operation Bernhard is this. In economic warfare, destroying a nation's faith in its currency can be more devastating than destroying its factories or its armies. Subscribe to Finance Traveler. We trace the flow of capital across centuries and help you navigate the future with clarity.